The situation in Gaza is becoming more desperate. Food and water are critically low, and the enclave's only power plant has shut down after running out of fuel. Israel has formed an emergency government and war cabinet to oversee the fight against Hamas after militants staged the deadliest attack on the country in decades. Israel is pounding Gaza with airstrikes, and troops and tanks have been mobilised near the border in preparation for a possible ground offensive. Hamas and other militants stormed southern Israeli villages during their rampage, abducting dozens of men, women and children.
They took the three men, my boy and the family's father and another boy into a black car, and the 7 terrorists with them, and they drove away. And we don't know where they are now. And we want the world to help us.
The death toll on both sides continues to rise. The Israeli military says more than 1,200 people have died in Israel. Palestinian officials say 1,100 people have been killed in retaliatory strikes in Gaza. Neighbourhoods have been reduced to rubble. The United Nations says a humanitarian crisis is unfolding, with more than 250,000 people displaced. A total blockade of Gaza has cut food and fuel deliveries. Power is limited to those with generators, and hospitals are overwhelmed with the injured.
We're already beyond the capacity of the system to cope. Already I have 50 patients waiting to go to the operating room that I cannot get to the operating rooms because the priority is for more critically ill patients. All supplies are running short. The number of wounded has completely used up what was already a denuded system and a crippled system as a result of 15 years of siege.
Former Israeli ambassador to the UK, Mark Regev, says Israel is trying to minimise civilian casualties by urging people in Gaza to move away from Hamas strongholds.
We've urged the civilian population of Gaza to move away from Hamas strongholds because we don't want to see them caught up in the crossfire. They are not our target. Our target is the Hamas military machine, the Hamas leadership, the Hamas political structure. And it's going to be a war, and wars are messy, and we're going to lose people ourselves. I've got a daughter who's serving in the south in a military unit, and I'm not unique. My friends, as Israelis, we're going to war, and going into Gaza is going to be costly. We understand that, right? And the Gazans know better than anyone else, where does Hamas have its strong points. Once again, we are focusing our attacks on the Hamas military machine, on its political structure. Now, I unfortunately know in all conflicts, innocent civilians will be caught up in the violence, but you can't take away from Israel our right to defend ourselves against these sort of barbaric attacks.
Tania Harry is Executive Director of Gisha, an Israeli non-profit organisation which advocates for the freedom of movement of Palestinians. She's calling on the international community to help restore humanitarian access for Gaza.
Last Saturday, what we saw was just really a massacre. As we're speaking today, more than 1,000 families have just buried their loved ones. More than 100 families are waiting to hear about their loved ones who've been taken hostage into the Gaza Strip. And the rest of the country is really praying for their safety and for their return. There are thousands who are injured. I really can't explain and express the extent of the sorrow and the trauma that people are feeling here in Israel. In response to this horrible massacre, however, Israel has opened really the gates of hell on Gaza. What we're hearing today is just dreadful. On the ground today, the power plant stopped functioning because there's not enough fuel to power its generators. There's no electricity coming into the strip whatsoever. That means that it's a complete blackout. Hospitals are struggling to cope with the number of casualties that are coming in. They're running out of medical supplies. Medical teams are exhausted. We're talking about more than 5,000 injured so far, and there are just about half as many beds to treat them in the hospitals. more than 1,000 people have been killed. People are running out of water in their homes, and really it's just getting more and more dire by the minute.
Do you know how long those emergency supplies of things like food and water and medicine, how long they have left?
It's not clear exactly how much supply is left, but I can tell you that we're already hearing about fuel shortages. We're already hearing about hospitals that have shut down functions. They're only treating the most emergency cases right now. We're already hearing about shortages of supplies. So we're talking about hours, we're talking about days. Water is already not available to about 650,000 people in the Strip. So really, it's a matter of time. It's an emergency situation.
There have been calls for an humanitarian corridor to be opened up with Egypt. Who's involved in those discussions and how urgently is that needed?
People are telling me, a colleague in Gaza I spoke to yesterday, that people are waiting for death at this point. It could either be a fast death that comes from an airstrike, or it can be a slow death that comes from starvation, from lack of water. That's really what people are telling us. They're saying they have no words. And as of tonight, as the fuel in generators is running out, people are losing battery power on their phones. They can't charge their phones. They can't log onto their computers. We're losing contact with people one by one. So I won't even be able to tell you what people are thinking. They're simply just being cut off from the world.
You talked about the events that took place over the weekend in southern Israel, those terrorist attacks by Hamas that saw babies being killed, 260 young people massacred at a music festival. Those attacks obviously cannot be defended. Hamas is now threatening to kill a hostage every time there is an airstrike without warning in Gaza. What is the feeling there about these actions from Hamas?
The country is really united in being just appalled and shocked and horrified by these actions. The defense minister said that, Hamas are human animals and they'll be treated as such. I condemn the actions of Hamas. As somebody who heads an organization that works with people in Gaza every day, I want to remind, though, that the vast majority of people in Gaza are civilians. 2.2 million people, half of them children. We're talking about more than 1 million children. These people were not involved in what happened, and they shouldn't be punished for it. I think we also need to think about the day after. I hope this crisis ends quickly. And I don't know what the goals of this military operation are at this point. But I know that there's a day after, and we need to think about that.
What would a proportionate response from Israel look like if what you're saying is that it's disproportionate, the response from Israel to these attacks?
There are rules in war. Israel knows what those rules are, and those rules apply even after a horrible, horrible massacre like the one we saw on Saturday. They apply even when your opponent doesn't respect those rules. And I think that they are in place, to secure all of us. I think, the right response is a proportionate response. It's one that takes precaution not to harm civilians. It's one that certainly doesn't deliberately target civilians. And I'm afraid to say that the actions taken by my government, not just in the way it's conducting its hostilities, but also the decision to stop entry of water, of electricity, of all humanitarian aid, of food. These are actions which directly target the civilian population. There is no context in which those kinds of actions can be justified. There is no military imperative in them. It's a purely retaliatory measure, and I'm calling on the world really to intervene to stop this.
Tania Harry speaking to us from Israel. At least 2 repatriation flights will leave Tel Aviv beginning tomorrow to help Australian citizens leave the war-torn region. Political reporter Nicole Hegarty joins me now from Parliament House. Nicole, tell us more about these flights.
Good morning, Karina. Well, it's believed there's some 10,000 Australian citizens living in Israel and surrounds or visiting the area currently. And Qantas has agreed, after an appeal from the federal government, to fly 2 repatriation flights from Israel to Israel's airport in Tel Aviv to London. Those 2 flights will start tomorrow. The first one's tomorrow. The second one is on Saturday. So they will go to London, and then further connecting flights are still being worked out from that point. Other countries have already been offering repatriation flights this week, with flights landing in places like Portugal and Brazil, and that's left some Australians like Keanu Vicente frustrated and questioning the process.
We are traumatised. We are in need of immediately getting back to our homes, immediately getting back to our families. We need our government to take responsibility and do what the other countries are doing around the world and getting their people home. Do actual repatriation flights, not just an assisted flight to leave a danger zone.
And any Australian that is looking to get on board these 2 flights should make contact and make sure they're registered on the Department of Foreign Affairs Smart Traveller website. For urgent consular assistance, there are 2 phone numbers, one for outside of Australia, and that is +61 6261 3305, so that's from overseas, and from within Australia the number is 1300 555 135. So that's from within Australia for anyone looking for urgent consular assistance, people either in Israel or Australians with family over there.
So, Nicole, what are the ongoing security concerns?
Well, of course, it would come as no surprise, given what we've been seeing happening in the region, that there would, of course, be security concerns related to any flights trying to land and then take off from the airport in Tel Aviv. There's been missiles detected in the area, in the vicinity of the airport, and that's prompted quite a number of airlines to cancel or suspend flights heading out and also in to Tel Aviv's airport. One of the latest has been British Airways. There was a flight that was just about to land and they actually turned it back around to London and have suspended all flights. So that's something we've been seeing over the past few days. And Reuters is also reporting that Israel's Airports Authority has recently detected rockets flying in the vicinity. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has left open the door to calling upon the Air Force's resources in terms of planes to carry out further repatriation flights if they are needed after these initial 2. Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill says the shape of further flights is still being worked through.
Foreign Minister's been working very hard on this. It is going to be something that needs to shift and change a little bit as the security situation changes, and I'll allow the Foreign Minister to speak to those options. At this stage, those Qantas flights are our starting point, and we'll continue to work very hard to make sure that Australians who need to leave are able to do so.
And the government says some 122 Australians have already made their own way out of Israel and the surrounding area. Karina?
Nicole Hegarty reporting from Canberra. Thousands of people gathered in Sydney's east to commemorate the deaths of people killed in Israel. It comes as police told pro-Palestinian organisers their rally planned for the weekend could not go ahead. Reporter Alison Zhao joins me now. Alison, what was the mood like last night?
Karina, it was a sad and sombre gathering last night as thousands came to this cliffside park in Dover Heights in Sydney's east to pay their respects to those killed in Israel following the attacks by Hamas. And it was a sea of blue and white as Jewish leaders addressed the crowd and reflected on the lives lost and also called for more support for Israel. There was a heavy police presence here, as well as some high-profile attendees, including the Premier, Chris Minns, the State Opposition Leader, Mark Speakman, the Federal Opposition Leader, Peter Dutton, and the Federal Health Minister, Mark Butler, who was here in place of Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, who also spent last night mourning with the Jewish community at a synagogue in Melbourne. But the Premier, Chris Minns, delivered a speech and he expressed his sympathies with the Jewish Australian community. Take a listen.
Some of you are hated and targeted, sight unseen, character untested, simply and only because you are Jewish. And it is with eternal sorrow that I acknowledge that some of that hatred was seen in your own city, and I'm deeply, deeply sorry for it.